Yeah, I know. I'm not particularly proud of this one either. Welcome to Day 5 of Z Memories with Beat Blades Haruka, otherwise known as Choko Sennin Haruka, which is how I'll be referring to it as I only played the Japanese version. A visual novel that I don't think is actually good at all, but dang do I have a history with it. It's also a fantastic excuse to talk a tiny bit about a subject I've been shying away from. As far back as forever, when it comes to different medias, one thing has remained a constant. Whether it's television, anime, books, drawings, 3D artwork, video games, one thing is for sure. Whenever a new form of content comes out, you'd better believe that people will first try to make porn out of it, and visual novels is definitely no exception to that rule. In fact, I go as far to say, in the visual novel industry in Japan, a solid 90% or more would fall under this category. It doesn't help that many of the most renowned visual novels usually have adult elements like, as I always mention, Fate Stay Night, Love Alternative, Air, Full Metal Daemon and Muramasa, just to name a few. In this channel, I've always tried to introduce visual novels that I thought told an amazing story, or was a great game regardless of whether it had 18+ elements or not. That said, the vast majority of visual novels that come out in Japan every day fall under a different subcategory called Nukige. Unlike the visual novels I like to talk about, Nukiges place emphasis on being fat material first and foremost, and having an actual story second, if even at all. And when I say Nukige, I'm not talking about stuff like Nekopada, I'm talking about VNs like oh boy, I'm gonna even regret just mentioning these. Tamani Nasagi, Kansen, Bible Black, Simon, insert whatever name you want here, just to name a few popular examples. These are all names that honestly, even if you didn't play them, you might have actually heard of them. Well, mostly probably Bible Black, because that's achieved like meme status. For these types of visual novels, let's not fool ourselves. The point isn't to tell a compelling story, it's to show as many compromising and, shall we say, unique positions for these characters to be in. Now, is having a good story and having 18+ scenes mutually exclusive? The answer is no, of course not. I've hopefully proven that already just with my previous videos alone. It's just a matter of what the author or creator puts emphasis on when making the work. But of course, it just so happens that sex usually helps sell a product regardless of what it is. So why did I bring up this whole topic in the first place when today's topic is Choko Sennin Haruka? And if you recognize this Japanese title just from name alone, you know who you people are. Well, let me put it this way. Let us say that this bar here represents how much a visual novel emphasizes the 18+ scenes versus how much emphasis it places on the story. On the left side here, we have a pure Nukige, something that was made for the sole intention of being fat material, like Tamani Nasagi. A bit further right, I tossed in, I don't know, Monster Girl Quest, where it's still heavy on the 18+ content, but there is a story buried underneath it all. In the middle, I'd have a usually game like Kamidori Alchemy Meister. Then on the right, we'd have something like Air and Fate, where they have 18+ content, but it's clearly kind of an afterthought, horribly done, and completely out of place in the actual story. Finally, at the end, we have non-H visual novels like Phoenix Wright, Zero Escape series, and so on. Choko Sennin Haruka would be somewhere around here, let's say, between Monster Girl Quest and Kamidori Alchemy Meister, where it's relatively heavy on the 18+ content, but there's still an emphasis on story and the actual RPG combat that is in the game. What I'm trying to say is that most visual novels tend to fall somewhere along this line graph. Even if the visual novel has adult content in it, that doesn't necessarily mean it is a Nukige. There is quite a variety on how much each visual novel focuses on the H content. At this point you might ask, well Zirian, that's great and all, but why is it on Z Memories? Is it just your favorite VN on a lonely night? And while that is a great guess, no, that's not it. I just have a bit of history with it that makes me always remember it. So in day 2, I talked about how Gaozu Island was the first visual novel I ever completed in Japanese. And while that is true, it is not the first visual novel I ever tried to play in Japanese. That award goes to today's topic, Choko Sennin Haruka. Honestly, when I picked it up, I didn't really know just how much focus there was on the 18+ content in the game. Which I know, big shock, and Eroge emphasized 18+ scenes in it, but let me explain. At the time, I had played a couple visual novels by this point, with my favorite being a title known as Sengoku Rants. I had a blast with that game, did a whole video on it in case you want more information on it. Sengoku Rants has great music, great gameplay, great humor and characters. Anyways, I really liked Alisoft, and when looking for a game to practice my Japanese on, I naturally chose one of their titles. After quickly looking through the catalog, I landed upon Choco Sending Haruka because, well, it had ninja girls in it, and the main girl, Haruka, was the one that hit my preferences at the time. I mean, sure, it had 18 plus scenes, I didn't go in not knowing that, but so did Sengoku Rants, and I thought that game was amazing on story and gameplay alone. I also watched the opening for the VN and I thought it was really good. The theme song was super catchy. So I ended up trying to play it. Unfortunately, what ended up happening was that I had a hard time reading it since a lot of the Japanese used in the game was pretty antiquated. A lot of characters came from the past, which meant they used old-timey dialect that you just don't see in modern Japanese. It also wasn't easy to read and people talked a lot, which yeah, it's a visual novel, I should have expected that, but still. I ended up dropping it and playing Gaozu Island instead, as I mentioned in day 2. I did eventually go back years later to play through it once though, which brings us to today. Alright, enough about my history with it, let's talk a bit about the visual novel itself. Choco Sending Haruka is a visual novel RPG by Alicesoft, and acts as a spiritual sequel to Choco Tenchi Escalade, and spiritual prequel to Choco Shinki Exio. If you are wondering what Choco stands for, the word that brings this series together, well, in Chinese it's Chaoang, which means superb. I think that translation makes more sense to the Japanese one, which off of Google Translate is exaltation or beats. Which really, what does beat even mean? Like, what? In the first place, I don't even think Choco is a real word in Japanese. Instead, it's just two kanji smashed together, but what do I know? Language lessons aside, Choco Sending Haruka follows the story of Ikusabe Takamaru. Basically, evil ninjas invade Japan, Takamaru and his childhood friend Narika gets attacked, but are quickly saved by Haruka, a good ninja who has time traveled from the past. Haruka then asks Takamaru to have sex with her because, well, lo and behold, Takamaru is actually the ancient heir to a clan of heroic ninjas who have protected Japan from the shadows, and has the superpower to give his dragon wheel energy through sexual activity. Holy hell! Soon after, Takamaru and Haruka work together with the modern ninja clan to protect Japan against the Dark Shinobi. If that sounds like the most bullshit excuse plot you have ever heard, you are probably right. Look, I never said this was a good visual novel, just that I remember it. The gameplay itself is this RPG simulation thing where you're given a set amount of time to train your ninjas through the power of BS, dragon wheel, sexual energy, whatever. In between boning the ninjas to power them up, you also have to fight off the ninjas invading Tokyo, and occasionally bosses until you have access to the boss dungeon where you can finish them off until the next one appears. The amount of actions you can do is controlled by stats, which you can raise, and RNG dice rolling. And yeah, I legitimately think that's all I have to say with regards to the visual novel itself. As I said earlier, I don't actually think Choco Sending Haruka is an amazing visual novel or anything. Really, it's just kind of average. Is the story terrible? Well, aside from the premise being one of the dumbest excuses I've ever heard for sex to be a main part of the game, no, not really. It's certainly kind of generic, but it's still a serviceable plot. The reason why I picked it up in the first place was I saw the opening and really liked it. I think it's pretty good, especially when you compare it to some of the other openings to visual novels I saw back in the day. It's like, dang, there is actually a fully animated opening that looks pretty solid and has a catchy theme? Crazy! Most of the time, all we usually got was like a slightly upgraded slideshow, and not a good one either. Almost a decade later, I still really like the look of the main heroine Haruka. Again, this is 100% my personal preference talking here. She's also a nice girl personality-wise to boot. There are two other heroines in the game, Narika and later Subaru, both of whom have their own sets of endings and scenes, of course. Sure, they exist. I don't have much to comment about them. You certainly will see scenes with all three of the heroines if you actually end up playing the game. I still even remember the good endings to it too, only because the story is so simple that there wasn't anything to forget. The visual novel itself is pretty variable in deciding whether you want to see horrible things happen to them, or just the lovey-dovey stuff with Takamaru, as the game itself is pretty easy in that you won't really lose fights unless you are intentionally seeking those lose scenes, if you know what I mean. It's got multiple endings and all that jazz. I don't really recommend it. I think there are plenty of Alicesoft games that have a much better plot and gameplay. That said, for whatever reason, Manga Gamer released a translation of it under the title Beat Blades Haruka, so if you want to go check it out, go for it. It exists. It's in English. There are certainly far worse visual novels you could be playing, and I think the music's pretty good. I don't actually know what the translation is like since I only played the Japanese version a long time back, but the option is there. I won't say anything. I already admitted I played this game, and you can certainly do far worse than this. That about wraps up day 5 of Z Memories. Like if you enjoyed the video as always, Twitter handle will be on the center of the end screen in a hot second, and click the subscribe and notification buttons if you haven't already done so to stay tuned when day 6 of Z Memories comes out. As for the teaser this time, let me say that this is the only visual novel I have ever played that I can safely say I entirely regret trying to 100% complete it. As usual, the previous Z memory on Dual Savior is on top, with the bottom being something else you'll hopefully find interesting. And with that, I'll see you next time.